Good morning, everybody. We're going to get started. My name is Luisa Lopez, and welcome to the June 2020 Manhattan Borough Board. I am the Director of Digital Media and resident DJ here at the Manhattan Borough President's Office. Together with Elka Moretti from the Community Affairs Unit, I'll be working the technical aspects of today's Borough Board. Some housekeeping details before we get started. You will have an opportunity to submit questions today. To do so, just type your question into the Q&A module at the bottom of your control panel. Depending on how you are set up, that'll either be at the top of your screen or the bottom of your screen. As time allows, your questions will be, as many questions as possible will be addressed in today's meeting. As usual, if you're joining us via phone, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. And please identify yourself when called upon. For our panelists, please utilize the raise hand function to make comments or questions. This meeting will be recorded and will be made available via the Borough President's YouTube channel later on today, and will be live streamed via Facebook once we begin recording. With that being said, if anybody has any questions, you can drop them for me in the chat or in the Q&A. And without further ado, I leave you with Deputy Borough President Aldrin Bonilla. Thank you.
Thank you, Luisa. Can everybody hear me? All righty. Can everyone sit where they sat last month? It just gets a little confusing if you sit in different seats. It's the order gets thrown out. So we're ready to begin. If we can identify all the chairs that are in the room, community board chairs, and then if there's any council members, but if we could begin with just stating your name so that the public that's viewing on Facebook and the 80 participants currently viewing it now can know who the different community board chairs are. So if we could begin with community board 1. Unmute yourself, please. Are you able to unmute yourself? Oh, no one's able to unmute themselves. Okay. Luisa or no, can you give the panel? Okay, there we go.
It just worked. So this is Anthony Notaro from CB1.
Thank you. Community Board 2.
Carter's walking.
Community Board 2, is that Carter Booth?
Yeah, Carter's just walking.
Okay, we got Community Board 2, Carter Booth. Community Board 3. Community Board 3. All right, that's it. Community Board 4.
So I couldn't unmute.
Oh, wait.
This is Michael Marino, first vice chair.
Hey, Michael, welcome. I see you there. Community Board 4.
Lowell Kern, Chair CB4.
Thank you. Community Board 5. Unmute yourself, Vicky. Oh, we can unmute you then, I think. No, hold on, Vicky. Can we unmute Vicky?
Yep.
Vicky, we are clicking ask to unmute, so you have to approve to unmute. There you are.
There we go.
Hey, it's me, Vicky Barbero, CB5.
Thank you, Vicky. CB6? CB6, please unmute.
Molly, there you go.
Yep. It doesn't let you unmute. You have to. There's a delay. So Molly Hollister, Chair, Community Board 6.
Hi, Molly. Good morning.
Hi. Morning.
Community Board 7.
Good morning, Mark Diller, Community Board 7 Chair.
Good morning, Mark. Community Board 8.
Good morning, Alita Camp, CB8. Thank you.
Good morning, Alita. Community Board 9.
Good morning, Barry Weinberg, Community Board 9.
Good morning, Barry. Community Board 10. Let me see if I see Cicely. Oh yeah, there goes Cicely.
Yeah, sorry, I just got off another call.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Community Board 10.
Cicely Harris, everyone.
Yes, Cicely Harris.
Community Board 11.
Where's Nelsa?
I don't see Nilsa. Does anyone see Nilsa?
I've just texted Nilsa to see if she's logging in or not. This is Xavier Santiago, Vice Chair, Community Board 11.
All right. Good morning, Xavier.
Good
Community
morning,
Board,
everyone.
Community Board 12.
Good morning, Eliezer Bueno, Chair, Community Board 12.
Okay. Eliezer, you're joining us by phone, correct?
Yes, I am.
What are the last 4 digits of your phone?
3885.
All right, 3885. If Noah and Luisa can make a note of that. And for those of you joining by phone, again, *6 to unmute and *9 to raise your hand. We also have the borough president, Gail Brewer, this morning. We caught her
I'm
drinking
here.
some. What are you drinking there? A nice cup of
Coffee. Nice cup of good coffee.
Great, great. Does anyone see any council members on yet? Okay, so we'll get to them as they get here. So the first order of business is the adoption of the June Borough Board agenda. Do we have a motion to adopt?
Motion.
Okay, that's
Second.
Low Kern motioned, and we have a second. We have various seconds, but I'll take Alita as a second. Do we have all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? Hearing none, motion passes. Next, we have the adoption of the May 2020 Borough Board minutes, which you all received about 3-4 days ago. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Okay, Mark moved. Do we
Second.
have a second? Who seconded?
Second. Molly.
Okay, Molly Hollister seconded. Do we all in favor say aye?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none, motion passes. Next, we'll get to the Community Board Chair updates. And then we'll have the Manhattan Borough President update, followed by council members, and then a discussion on phase 1 and everyone's favorite topic, phase 2. I know Gail is dying. Gail loves talking about phase 2, and the sooner we can get talking about phase 2, the better. We also have Manhattan Borough President staff monitoring all the Twitter sphere and social media for any announcements that may be coming at 10 o'clock from the mayor's office otherwise. So any announcements that we hear, we'll be able to update everyone in real time. So if we could begin with Community Board 1. Community Board 1, your Community Board update. Anthony Notaro?
Yes, good morning and thank you. So hopefully in the interest of time, a couple items to go over. This month has been very busy, as you all have. Our focus was on the development plans that Howard Hughes has for some remaining pieces at the South Street Seaport. One of which is the parcel known as 250 Water Street. And we had downzoned that parcel several years ago, I think back in 2003. Howard Hughes would love to move development rights from other parcels in the Seaport to that and go above the current zoning, which is only 120 feet, to something that may be over 900 feet. You can imagine that the community is quite in an uproar about that. And we're working hard to preserve our zoning, but also work with Howard Hughes and EDC to figure out the real status of those development rights. And several people are helping us out, including the borough president, her office, and even Scott String and his office. Along with that, at 250 Water Street, there is a brownfields issue. It appears there may be some contaminants at that site. Right now, it is simply covered over as a blacktop and used as a parking lot, commercial parking lot. And the community and CB1 have worked hard with DEC to come up with a remedial investigation work plan. And that was presented by DEC just last week. I think we're all focusing now on what may be a very difficult and different budget issue. One of the issues that we're wrestling with is some recent announcements about both the school safety and traffic enforcement being moved out of NYPD, both their responsibility and their budget, and moved elsewhere. And I know our committees are working on responding to this, but one in particular, the movement of traffic enforcement, we see as a potential big benefit because at least in CB1, I imagine there's an impact in other community boards that placard parking, enforcement of it has been a real trouble in our community. And so if moving traffic enforcement out of NYPD into, let's say, DOT or another agency, we think that could have real benefits for us. So over the next couple of days, it'll be interesting to hear what other community boards are thinking about that. I want to shout out to Alita that she started to alert other community boards about potentially collaborating on some unified position on social justice and what's been going on in our country in the last couple of weeks. So we look forward to working with all of you on that. There was another issue, I think Alden, you brought this up, about the potential expiration of free Wi-Fi for school children and families. And obviously we support that, but I think that, again, having a unified voice from the whole borough board may make that even more effective. I want to also thank Alden for your prompting us on getting on top of the census response. And we forwarded your email to all members. Many of them responded back that they had already responded. They were notifying their neighbors and family. So that was a helpful prompt. I think one final thing, next week, our full board meeting on Tuesday night for June, we will have our officers election. I'm standing for my last term as chair of CB1. There will be other candidates, and I hope to be reelected. But if I'm not, it's been a pleasure to work with the borough board, and I assume I will continue in some capacity to help out and continue our good work. I'm very confident that whatever happens with the elections of CB1, that we will continue in our tradition. So that's it, Alden. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anthony. And the census reminder or prompt was very much Gail's idea, in the sense that Gail said, I will call every single one of the 600 community board members to find out if they filled out the census. And I said, wait, Gail, let me narrow that list down. Maybe you can call 100 community board members, but all 600. Let's see if there's a better way. So next update is Community Board 2.
Eldrin, and Gail.
Hey, weren't you just outside, Carter? Wow.
I was, but now I'm inside. I was having trouble unmuting there. So it's hard to believe that our last borough board meeting was 28 days ago. You know, once again, it seems in 4 weeks, you know, the world around us has changed pretty significantly. And it's 23 days since George Floyd was murdered. It's really marked some significant changes for our board, for our city, you know, certainly the state and the country. Some very positive steps have begun. We're looking forward to taking more steps to doing what we can do in our part as a community board to right a lot of the wrongs and the systemic racism that's prevalent around us. As part of that, we formed a equity working group. It's going to be chaired by two of our members, co-chaired Mark Fitzgerald and Patricia Laria, looking at some of the ways that our board can do better in our processes and making sure that conversations happen when they should be happening, and trying to make it part of our complete process to make sure it's never avoided in those processes. And that's, we'll be looking at our questionnaires and the materials and information that we collect, and from some initial discussions that some of the other board chairs have had, we're hoping to work with other boards on something perhaps beyond our borders and looking throughout Manhattan and maybe even the city. our community has been home to many, many incredible number of peaceful protests. Just as most other community boards in Manhattan have been. We've also been, unfortunately, the distractions of quite a bit of looting and damage to a lot of storefronts and people who have been looking to reopen. And that's something that in the last week, in particular, people have really been looking into at the local businesses. The number is quite staggering. It's over 100 storefronts have been damaged in some of the reports that we've received. We've also done a lot of other work. We started off the month with our reopening working group, which put forward an extensive set of recommendations to the city council and to the mayor on different types of outdoor dining that we could envision in our community. We saw 4 different types of outdoor dining. We're hoping that some of those recommendations are taken into account by the city. If not now, perhaps in future phases as well, some more detailed aspects. It's incredible. This topic's really important to us since we're home to so many eating and dining establishments in our community. I think that Community Board 2 has the most number of licensed sidewalk cafes. So it's something that's very important to our community, and we look forward to working with everybody on that going forward. We also discussed the Senate Bill S8392, which would permit permit licensees under the to-go drinks and delivery of drinks. We recommend some modifications to that. Our Traffic and Transportation Committee has been continuing to look at the Open Streets program. I don't think that we have enough open streets. It's something that as people become more comfortable with the topic, it seems less of an issue to just close down streets for our community so that people can use the open streets in different ways. Our Economic Development and Small Business Community hosted a panel discussion with local business owners regarding actions that could help them reopen. We heard a lot of interesting ideas there. And we also heard that there's still a lot of conversations that need to be had between businesses and their landlords. It seems that that's really a huge issue, is the rent, and a lot of those conversations don't seem like they're taking place yet. We had a fantastic discussion last night in our Schools and Education Committee, which was the topic was talking to kids about racism. We had 3 phenomenal speakers. It was really, really great discussion, and we also had a host of our regular committee meetings. You know, I'm not sure where the next 30 days will bring us, but it's been pretty amazing set of challenges in the last 30 days. And so we're going to be working going forward, doing the best that we can do to create positive change. So thanks.
Thank you, Carter. Community Board 3.
Thanks, Aldrin. So I won't repeat what's already been said, but ditto for Community Board 3 for what Carter and Anthony have brought up. I'll just bring up some things more specific to us. We, as I mentioned in our last meeting, the to-go issue with alcohol has been a big issue in our district, and as seen in the news, it's been a big issue in a lot of other people's districts as well, with people basically congregating outside of bars and restaurants. We want to thank the Borough President's Office for coming to a walkthrough earlier in the week with the Lower East Side bid and the Community Board and some other elected officials to discuss the issue. And we're very happy that some restaurants and bars have willingly agreed to close until phase 2 happens and they're able to have their outdoor seating areas, so that will alleviate some of the issue. But we do think it's a big issue that will probably continue to occur, not only in our district, but throughout everybody else's districts as well. All of our committees are back to meeting regularly now. Most are focusing on their district need statements. So we have our district needs underway and trying to discuss and anticipate whatever the new normal winds up being and how that affects our district needs. And one of the other big issues with our board, I think I mentioned this in our last report last month, is the 70 Mulberry Street and the proposed demolition by the city of that building that was ravaged by fire. Initially, again, the two big camps are people who want it demolished and rebuilt, and people who want it preserved and restored. And there was some very heated discussion about that at our last full board meeting. And the tenants of the building, who have been longstanding tenants of the building, all want it demolished and rebuilt so that they can have better, bigger space to use. So that is the resolution that the community board passed in support of the tenants. One other issue that we've been having since our board has moved online is our full board meetings have become marathons. Mainly, one of the biggest challenges we have is, as much as we appreciate all the elected officials coming to our meeting and wanting to give reports, I think because everyone's in the comfort of their home, those reports are going on rather long. If you take a look at our last 3 online meetings, our elected reports were almost 2 hours long. So I'd be interested to hear how other boards are managing their online meetings, keeping time down. You know, our bylaws state that elected officials get 10 minutes and their reps get 2 minutes. And we've been trying to keep to that as much as possible, but it's just become rather unwieldy. And I think, and I just want to thank Gail again for attending our new member meet and greet. We are working now to plan some new member orientations for the end of this month and beginning of July. Some of those coincide with some of the trainings that the Borough President's Office just announced yesterday. So we are sort of reconfiguring what we're doing so that our new members can go to those trainings as well if they're interested. And that's about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Before we turn to Community Board 4, if I know we have some DOT representatives that will be speaking on open streets and outdoor dining in terms of the latest that they know. I think I see Jackie Lazaro and maybe Kimberly Rancourt, but if you can, in the chat room, if you can speak with Rosie in the chat room and let Rosie know that you're here, and in terms of the specifics of your presentation. And we'll be calling on you after we call on the borough president. So if you could check in with Rosie or in the chat room, Jackie Lazaro and Kimberly Rancourt, in terms of what you're prepared to speak about in terms of outdoor dining and open space. Next, we'll turn to Community Board 4. Community Board 4.
Couple of quick things, Aldrin, you mentioned announcements. The mayor, while we've been meeting, has announced that phase 2 officially begins Monday, so he's finally in line with the governor on that, including the open restaurants plan. And separately, because my son texted me this, the Supreme Court has upheld DACA with Roberts joining the light side. Just thought everyone would be interested in that. For CB4, we have been having a major problem, specifically at the corner of 54th and 9th, where there is a bar on each corner. And that has turned into CB4's version of the French Quarter. We met with a bunch of the bar owners last week to try and ease things for this weekend. We gave them 2,000 masks to give up. We agreed on a lot of plans with them, and it all went to hell. So we've been talking to the SLA because, you know, it's in some of these cases, it's more than just people congregating outside the bars. As there are, I know we share an owner with CB2 who has just decided to just put out tables and, you know, just let everything happen. You know, loud music, the whole thing. So we've been in contact yesterday with the SLA because, you know, the only way this is going to change is through some sort of enforcement, we think. We hosted an education forum last Monday about how schools, you know, reopening of schools in the fall, which was intended by over 150 parents in the district. That went really, really well. We launched our new website about an hour ago. And then on more pressing issues, at our full board meeting last Wednesday, I made an opening statement about racism and the NYPD and just inherent racism in our office, in the district, in the world. So we formed a working group, a social justice working group that has met once already to see what we can do both within the board office and district-wide to combat, systemic racism, not specifically NYPD issues, but systemic racism issues. We are looking at things like training for board members, and if the borough president's office has any training we can steal for that, we'd love to hear it. We are joined on that committee by one member of the public who happens to be a former deputy borough president who just moved to our district. And we're looking forward to getting some suggestions by our July full board meeting, which is at the end of July, just about things we can do to help combat this. We also started a working group. We reformed our business working group, which doesn't meet regularly, to meet with owners of small businesses, specifically in the district, to see what we can do to help them. And that's kicking off this week. The other thing we did is there were 27 separate instances of looting on Monday, June 1st, just in Chelsea within a 4-block area. We met yesterday with the 10th Precinct Commander, Kevin Coleman. Most of the issues that we had seem to have come from Police Plaza. So we are asking our council member, the speaker, and the borough president will be in touch with you, Gail, to please lean on the NYPD to do, among other things, reopen the streets by the precinct, because it makes, in our case, 20th Street, where the 10th Precinct is located, look like an armed fortress, while the rest of the community feels like they're not being protected after the looting incidents. So in that meeting, well, we appreciate the inspector's participation with us. His answers left a lot to be desired, quite honestly. And that's not to bash the NYPD. We have some great officers in the precinct, but this all seems to be coming down from Police Plaza. So that's where we are for CB4. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't know
Thank you, Lo.
how that works,
but someone has their mic open. If you could please mute while you're on the other call. Thank you. Next we have Vicky Barbero, Community Board 5. Vicky?
Good morning, everyone. Well, it's really been a busy month for CB5. Midtown in particular, I agree with everything you've said, Lowell, in terms of how to deal with the closed streets and the precincts and how to deal with implicit bias. And we were particularly hard hit. For any of those of you who may have had the opportunity to go through Midtown, it's now being referred to as Plywood City. And it's pretty grim, with a number of residents very fearful, especially in the areas from, say, 14th Street up to 23rd and even up to 34th Street. We've had areas there that used to be warehouses, or not warehouses, but lofts that were converted decades ago into lovely neighborhoods. And the residents are now fearful that this is going to impact not only their lives in terms of streetscape, but of course their property values and so on. We did issue a statement of solidarity to protest racial injustice, and further to that, we're holding a series of meetings to address issues such as alternative policing models, access to housing, new approaches to criminal justice, and the provision of educational equity to all students. Which reminds me, we're also on board with agreement on the free internet access for students, Aldrin. Last month, I did mention the mayor's COVID advisory councils and that they neglected to include any representation from our 59 community boards. So our committees met, addressed issues, and each committee prepared letters or a reso to be sent to the mayor. I want to quickly just tell you what was in those letters. They can be found on our website in great detail. The Transportation, Liquor License and Parks Committee held a meeting with the New York City Hospitality Alliance to discuss restaurants and bars outdoor seating. So we came up with criteria that we recommended, and we had points of recommendation that the criteria be followed in determining street closures. We recommended that the city work closely with NYPD and local bids regarding security and maintenance, and recommended the standardization of quality of life rules across the district, like hours, noise, maintenance, music. We recommended the implementation that allows for maximum adaptability. That would be like a 30-day review to make sure that their licenses are in order. And last but not least, we want transparency to be every step of the process. We also recommended the city report back at frequent intervals to the community on how things are proceeding and which success matrices are being met. The Budget and Education Committee and City Services covered budget, of course, and tax base with the emphasis on the 5 to 7% cut across the board. They discussed restaurants, theaters, tourism, and related businesses. This is particularly important in Midtown. Hospitals and our concerns with the closures and downsizing of the beds throughout the city. Real estate and housing, particularly affordable housing, rent, holiday, and non-eviction measures. The Parks and Public Spaces Committee dealt with and wrote a letter regarding the sidewalk cafes, privatization of commercial use of our parks, and the shortfalls or absence of event fees, which means that our parks are, we want to make sure they stay welcoming, that they're accessible and well-maintained. And without those fees, there may be a problem. The Transportation and Environment Committee wrote a letter about the need for continuous data and reporting of current street use and changes. They mentioned understanding that all proposals and mitigations must be connected. So if you close one street, it impacts somewhere else and somehow else. They dealt with the thoughtful question of any immediate reversion back to the norm. For instance, intercity buses, if they do come back, they're going to have queues waiting on sidewalks, which means that you're having a problem with social distancing. A Land Use, Housing, and Zoning Committee really wrote two very, very strong resolutions. I'd love for you to read them if you could. The first one was the need for New York City to examine its role and responsibility in a post-COVID world and to draw conclusions on the impact of 20 years of planning policies that have really left our communities vulnerable, and the need to adapt our city with resilience as a driving principle. The second resolution was an appeal to mandate community board input, here I go again, in the mayoral COVID-19 recovery plan. And our resolve says that we demand that formal community board input be designed either through advisory councils or through a different outlet to provide a formal opportunity to discuss, comment, and opine on the ongoing formulation of the recovery and resiliency plan. Ay, ay, ay. These letters and resolutions, as I mentioned, are on our website. Further to that, we did do support Senator Hoylman's alcohol to go legislation, and we did have some caveats: no loitering or socializing in the vicinity, strict compliance with the open container law. We want to make sure that the delivery recipients are of legal age. And in response to complaints to the public or community boards, the SLA's ability to suspend or revoke a licensee's ability to sell alcoholic beverages for consumption, and the bill must be equitably administered. We approved Councilmember Power's CORE Act to create composting and electronics drop-off in each district. And last but not least, in response to the mayor's executive budget and the proposed cuts of $6 billion in light of the impact of COVID-19, and a projected revenue loss of $9 billion, we demanded, in addition to other concerns, reconsideration by the mayor regarding the distribution of budget cuts across the city agencies, including NYPD. Oh, and I had one last mention. Our district manager is retiring. So I can't tell you what this means to me, what a loss it is to me and to Community Board 5. So just wanted you to know we're starting our search. And if any of you know of any super duper candidates or someone you can think of that would even come close to Wally Rubin, I would be most grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vicky. Vicky, and the resolution on the lack of community board or community input on recovery and resiliency, that resolution went to who? Directly to the mayor, or was it a letter to
the mayor and everybody else in creation?
All right, so we could share that with the other community board chairs, and maybe we can get something out together as a borough board in that regard.
They're all on the website. I think it's under the heading of COVID-19 under projects.
Thank you.
Vicky, don't even think about poaching my district manager. I'll come after you.
I was gonna say something about the. I'll be quiet. Community Board 6, Molly Hollister.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Vicki, for all your work and everyone's work. So that's a lot. So I won't repeat anything, but we have been busy in Community Board 6. We have different issues. We're Midtown, but we're more residential, and we have really issues with lack of open streets and lack of open space. So a lot of our issues are around that. So I'll quickly go through these things. Our resolutions, we had full board last Wednesday, and we passed resolutions on open streets. We need to get our restaurants opened and running, and even at the capacity that they can to close some streets and have them out there. So we've passed resolutions on open streets. We passed 2 very strong resolutions focusing on civil rights and accountability for the NYPD and budget cuts. I shared those with all the chairs, so I'm glad that hopefully we can come together and form some kind of task force, but be continuing to talk about these issues. We also passed a resolution supporting continuing free and Wi-Fi, accessible Wi-Fi for all students. And I'm sure I'm forgetting some resolutions. There was a lot of work that went in just literally the last week and a half, 2 weeks. We supported Senator Hoylman's alcohol to go. Although I hear that maybe that's kind of in flux now. We are pushing for more protected bike lanes. We see a lot of nurses and doctors using the bike lanes and using City Bike and their own bikes now coming up and down 1st and 2nd Avenue, but we need them to be protected bike lanes, which there are some big gaps. We missed our parks meeting, so we're writing a letter because we do need our playgrounds open. We don't have a lot of bids. We have basically no bids in our area, just kind of a little periphery of a few bids. So we don't have a lot of park space. We don't have a lot of open space. We need our playgrounds open. We need the POPs to be open. So we just sent a note to city planning, and I think someone just responded back just now, but a lot of our POPs are closed because of COVID, but that's just, we're scrapping for open space here. The dog runs, we'll push for more funding for our parks versus funding for the NYPD, which again was one of our resolutions. The ESCR, the East Side Coastal Resiliency CAG, kicked into gear yesterday, so that was good. We'll continue those conversations, but we'll also hopefully have a lot of that business in our Land Use and Waterfront Committee as ESCR starts this fall. The East River project will start this fall for resiliency. Michael, to your point on the full board meetings going very long, the last one we really tried to ask the electeds to keep it to 5 minutes. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but they still went a little over, but it helped a lot. And we typically have liaisons and other speakers, limit them to 3 minutes. So ours was maybe an hour of that, which is still a little long, but not 2 hours. Yikes. And to Lowell's point, we in the midst of all this, we launched our new website in May, and I completely forgot to tell anyone. I don't know. It's very exciting. It looks great, but that's been launched. And then also to Lowell's point, on the we have a 13th precinct in our area that's a fortress, and we have streets and sidewalks closed off, and their vehicles parked, in the bike lanes and on the sidewalks, and it's a problem. It's an issue, and we're trying to work on that. So I feel like I'm forgetting some things, but I'll keep it at that for now. All right. Thanks.
Thank you, Molly. Community Board 7, Mark Diller.
Good morning and thank you. A couple of quick updates. They're going to sound familiar based on what our colleagues have just reported. We too are trying to not lose the momentum that has been gained from a more robust and perhaps more palpable awareness of the role of equity, race, and ethnicity in our society in general, and in as it translates here, we're trying to translate that into two different but related avenues, one of which is to bring that to our work on the budget and how we allocate resources with a view of not losing track of the inequalities, inequities, and the role of privilege in those conversations. But we don't want to lose the momentum on a more internal facing board operations perspective. And so we're working on finding a way to have a facilitated conversation among our board members to allow us to share on those issues and to, with a goal of having that inform everything that we do, not just have it be a one-off kind of moment. So more on that as we figure it out. There's an urge to have this done immediately. There's an urge to be responsive and so forth. But this is one of those things where I think as we are starting to understand how deeply this needs to reach, it's starting to feel like it's something that we need to do. It's more important that we get it right than we get it done fast. So we're going to continue to work on that. A couple of quick things. We have a group of resolutions, one adopted at June full board and two that will be presented in July full board that I recommend to my colleagues, at least in concept. They call for relief for the MTA. If we're going to reopen our city, obviously the first thing that has to happen is we have to get back to business. The restaurants, the bars, the tourism is a huge part of that. I'll speak about that in just one more second, but the MTA has to be viable or our city falls apart. And so basically these are revenue raising resolutions. One just flat out calls for the federal government to do what it should have done long ago. And that is both give us money to prop up the MTA until it can be sustaining. And the other is to reallocate the way in which funding at the federal level is channeled to the MTA. As you probably know, the MTA in New York City serves 40% of the nation's transit riders and gets only 16% of the funding that is associated with that. We're also proposing a gas tax, and we propose, and since that has to pass the state legislature, we would include in the gas tax money for bridges upstate so that hopefully it will pass. We were lucky to have the borough president with us yesterday on a walk around having to do with identifying appropriate places for outdoor retail. You've already heard all the issues there, so I won't repeat them. We're grateful for the borough president's bringing her office to that exercise. There were small business owners that accompanied us. It was very productive. And lastly, perhaps as part of the chasm in funding issues that are going to impact our youth, we're continuing to identify those ways in which disinvesting in our youth is both a short-term and a long-term debacle. And so we will be heard on those issues. We've already opined on SYEP. We've already opined on the way in which inequity has risen to the surface with respect to the remote learning and the ways in which some folks are just plain being left behind. Tonight, we will continue that conversation with respect to summer and after-school programs. And I share Vicky's lament at the loss of Wally Rubin. My goodness, he's a wonderful partner and a terrific model for the modern Major General. So we send our best regards to him and our condolences to you.
Thank you, Mark. Next, we have Community Board 8, Alida. Community Board 8, is she still on?
She is. She
oh
says
yeah,
she
Alida Camp.
herself.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, there. Okay. There we go. Thank you. Okay. So we've been busy on both COVID related and the racial injustice and social equality issues. On COVID, where we've been doing a series of programs designed to help businesses reopen. We did one on health and safety issues, and we're doing one on, the next one is on legal HR issues. We have an employment lawyer, and that's tomorrow night at 6:30. In 2 weeks, we'll be doing one on community. We've a former board member has written a list of guidelines called Do Your Part for the Restart to show community how instrumental they are in working with businesses and facilitating their reopening efforts. And after that, we may have other programs as well. They've been a series. We're also doing a 2-part series on contact tracing. The first one is designed to stress the importance of contact tracing and to try and reach communities of people who might not trust the government and might not trust the contact tracers and information. And even though, as Mark Levine mentioned last week, the city is prepared to walk dogs and get groceries, we're not sure that people will buy in. And actually, the numbers around the world are pretty illuminating. Only less than 40%, no matter what country you look at, of people are willing to participate in contact tracing. So we're concerned about that. We've had a lot of vigorous discussion on open streets and restaurants. There's concern about fairness to restaurants who may not be located in an ideal location. Who gets the space? What about the places that have been paying for outdoor cafe areas? We've been suggesting to DOT alternative spaces, such as construction sites where nothing is going on, and schoolyards, in kind of an expansive night market kind of a thing, or places where restaurants can rotate. But we haven't gotten a lot of traction with that. We're still looking at open streets and passed a resolution last night on Park Avenue. Our first iteration, as Gail will proclaim, was not a rising success. There's a lot of opposition. We're hopeful that this one is much more focused and tailored and that it will get a better response. We did pass a resolution last night as part of new business on calling for community boards to be involved in all of the mayoral panels and committees and working groups on reactions and responses to COVID. So we'll be having that resolution. Working with other boards on social justice issues, I've already gotten a lot of enthusiastic response, and I'm hopeful that other boards will be interested. Something I've been thinking about and talking to people about is an implicit bias program. While it can't be a training because there are too many people involved, it would be good to have people at least have some kind of self-reflection and hopefully identify some of those issues. The Youth Education and Library will be taking up the free Wi-Fi at their meeting on Monday. In response to the question about our meeting length, we haven't, the number of elected officials who came last night, it was not very many, I think 3 or 4, and their comments were pretty short. We have 2-minute limitation for reps of the elected officials and no questions and answers. That was a disaster in the first meeting. It was a terrible marathon, 6-hour meeting, but limiting, not having any questions at all has made all of the difference. Kohler is still an issue. Kohler is a residential facility for people out on Roosevelt Island. Part of the building was used as overflow for COVID patients. We're not sure because we haven't gotten good answers from HHC on whether COVID were mixed with non-COVID patients. There seem to have been a number of deaths, but no one knows what the cause of death was because people weren't being tested. So we have a meeting about that this afternoon. I'd also like to raise a couple of things that we're concerned about. even though Broadway theaters are not in our district, and I apologize for stepping on anyone's toes, the issue came up last night because a former board member is an actor and worked closely with the Irish Rap, and he was talking about the potential that these theaters, if they don't open, might be turned into condos. What a nightmare. So I'd like to talk and have some kind of thing about either subsidies for arts organizations or working to make sure that arts organizations are supported, because that's part of the heartbeat of New York. In terms of COVID itself, there's a lot of fear about a second wave from medical experts, and I don't know, and I don't think anyone knows about the city's preparation in case there is a second wave. Are we able to, do we know the ventilator situation? Are we really preparing for it? Because there is a lot of anticipation despite some of the publicity. And then I personally would like to see some kind of moratorium, if that's even possible, on construction, because we don't know what the landscape of the city is going to be like. Leases are down. Buying of condos was down even before COVID. We don't know what it's going to look like. And yet, with after hours variances and all of the construction that's going on, and still the digging of the holes, the shoring up of foundations, all of that business is still going on. And I'm really concerned, a number of people are, about a specter of empty monoliths around the city because this was not anticipated. Anyway, thank you very much. And good morning.
Thank you for your report. Next, we have Community Board 9, Barry.
Good morning, everybody. Happy to see everyone again this month. As I think Carter said, it has been a very, very, very wild and intense past 28 days.
Gail, were you saying you can't hear? You're on mute.
No, it was fading out with Vic, or just me. As long as it's everybody else, everybody can hear, it's fine.
Okay. Sorry, Barry, continue.
No, that's okay. You know, we, as a community board, have always been incredibly conscious of the disparate racial impacts that actions by the city and state have on our community. So this is not a new item on our agenda, but we were appalled by some of the images that we saw, not in our community, of actions of the NYPD and of encounters that some members of our community who were protesting downtown or in Brooklyn had when they were arrested by the NYPD. We are gravely concerned about that, and that is an issue and topic for discussion at our general board meeting tonight. That being said, we have maintained our very productive working relationship with the 30th Precinct in their outreach to the community. Hamilton Heights in particular is seeing a surge in heroin dealing. And so we have been working very closely with the 30th Precinct to address some of those issues on the relatively few small number of concentrated blocks where that activity is happening. We also held a previously scheduled and planned town hall with the commanding officer of the 30th Precinct, Deputy Inspector Soto, that was well attended and in which she very frankly confronted a lot of the issues that people have with the NYPD, and also was able to address the issues people had in the neighborhood with some of the crime that is negatively impacting their life and contributing to violence like slashings and shootings. And we are working to continue that dialogue. We will be taking up a resolution on the City Council's proposal to shift $1 billion of funding away from the NYPD, again in our general board tonight. And we would absolutely be interested in working with and collaborating with the other boards and the borough president's office in more systematic programming around community boards and structural racism and social justice. We have also been pushing for census completion. We had Nicole Yearwood from the federal census effort at our last meeting, and we went over our heat map in terms of response rates by census tract, and we have been proactively reaching out to census tracts with lower response rates, see if there's something we can do to bring them up. One of the concerns is whether or not those maps are reflecting group enumerations appropriately. So we're talking to the federal census people about that. I also, we continue to be in the throes of our Morningside Heights rezoning, which would be the last part of West Harlem to be rezoned. And it is designed to increase affordable housing, protect rent stabilized tenants, and prevent out of context luxury condo towers, 2 of which have already been under construction, 1 of which and City Council Speaker Corey Johnson and the borough president for collectively helping make this effort, what is to our knowledge the first effort, rezoning effort in the city of a neighborhood that is not led by DCP or EDC. And we are pushing and pushing. We're trying to coordinate a briefing for our community board with City Council land use development, land use folks this month. We are also having a digital presentation on the Arcado Theater, which is a gorgeous former kind of movie palace theater that has sat mostly vacant for many, many years. And we are hoping to preserve it and turn it into a community arts center through Article 711. So because it is landmarked, we can adjust the zoning to allow for more development on top of it in exchange for preserving the original structure, putting it to some community. That is on July 13th currently. And we moved that to July 13th so that we could hold, in conjunction with the other 3 uptown boards, uptown reopening kind of virtual town hall, credit of which had to go to Athena Moore and April Adams and other fantastic staff of the borough president's office for kind of helping shepherd the cats and bring us all together on this. This is designed to reach people who are not being reached right now and inform them of what's happening with reopening, the procedures for reopening, and precautions and things that other people in the community should know so that attendees can talk to the neighbors and be an informed, trusted source on these issues. And so DOT, NYPD, small business services will all be represented and be going over some takeaway guidelines for what's happening. So again, we are blessed to have amazing staff covering the uptown community boards, and I want to thank them. And then finally, we continue to look at the budget and the proposed budget cuts. Our committees are speaking with their counterparts in the city agency to really try to shift some of the cuts away from services to the most vulnerable, particularly our youth. We recognize that, this is a difficult time for the city budget-wise. We completely agree with CB7 that the federal government should be doing more to support local and state governments that have seen a massive drop-off in the tax revenue. And, relatedly, we are also preparing for try to help folks who are vulnerable as the courts reopen to evictions starting in August to prevent a wave of from sweeping our neighborhood where we feel many of our people are vulnerable and going to I think as regards to meetings running long, I have found it much harder to keep a tight rein on our online meetings, but we are getting better. Sometimes it feels harder to interrupt online and cut people off, but sometimes, that just needs to be done so that we can get out of there, not that much longer after 2 to 2.5 hours. So it is definitely, Zoom creep is definitely a thing, but we have done a pretty good job of pacing people, reminding people before they speak to keep it brief, and then also just be more willing to kind of speak over someone and Zoom their attention and move the agenda along. So that will be put to the test once again tonight. But thank you, everyone. Good to see you.
Thank you, Barry. Also, I want first for the people asking questions and viewing us through Facebook, we are going to get to some of the questions. Those of you viewing us through Zoom, we also see some of your questions. A lot's been happening in the last hour with the mayor's announcement, and we have some updates in that regard as well. And we also have DOT on deck to be able to answer questions as they can and as feasible. We also have been joined by council members Mark Levine and Ben Kalos. So council members Mark Levine and Ben Kalos will call on you to report out after the borough president's report, and we hear from DOT. So next we have Community Board 10. Cicely Harris, Community Board 10.
Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Cicely Harris. For our report today, I would just like to highlight my committee chairs and our district staff. We have been able to have all of our general board meetings and most of our committee meetings. So that is a great accomplishment. And I'm so excited that we were able to still be out there for the community. In this, everyone has talked about this, the tale of the two pandemics, COVID-19 and racial injustice and inequality. We have been toiling along. We have been supportive of the peaceful protests, and we're excited that those protests have been peaceful. A lot goes to our CBOs, the 125th Street bid for being out there, Street Corner Resources, WARM. They have been really supportive of the protest and having these conversations and keeping it safe. We haven't had any looting, and that's probably in a big part to the 125th Street bids initiative, that we have these black chalkboards that are up on all of the buildings. You've probably seen a lot of things like that across the country, but people are able to write positive messages on those black chalkboards. So while some of our businesses are still boarded, people are able to express themselves in a positive way and talk about why we are in the streets and why we are protesting. So that's one great thing that we have on 125th Street. Tomorrow we are having a Juneteenth event. So we're celebrating Juneteenth. As you all know, Governor Cuomo made that a state employee holiday and is looking to make that a state holiday. So we are having a Juneteenth event in collaboration with the NAACP and NAN, and that is via Zoom tomorrow at 11 a.m. Our housing committee, always busy. We had a tenant forum this past week with one of our community partners, A. Phillip Randolph Alliance. We had a really great turnout. There was a lot of good information. Manhattan Legal Services was there. Thank you, Madam Borough President, for being there. Athena for being one of our panelists. And just the involvement was wonderful, and the community really appreciated it. Our Parks and Rec Committee has passed a resolution to support a social justice commemoration exhibit of the Exonerated Five. We've been having these conversations. It will be hopefully an interactive exhibit to educate everyone about their rights and how we should be all about that social change in the criminal justice system, and importantly, to educate our young people about their rights. So we will be in communication with the community boards that are surrounding Central Park to talk about their visions for that and get input to make sure that everybody has a say. When we're also talking about, we're expanding it to the community as well. Our Economic Development Committee had a discussion on the racial wealth gap, and we had great commentary on that. We're coming out with a resolution on that. Everyone's been talking about open streets, so I don't want to belabor that point, but I agree with everything that's been said here today, that we need to have real communication and a cohesive plan that covers our communities, so there's not like a difference so much between downtown and uptown. We need to place importance on the communities, the CBOs that come to us, that they need to have a comprehensive plan and understand all the ins and outs and their responsibility in having these open streets. And we've had a conversation with some of those business alliances that are coming to us. We've started having those conversations and letting it be known what we're expecting for our community. Really quickly, the summer youth program, We are still focused on it. We are still advocating for it to happen. We also realize that if we don't get these jobs in our community, we will be disproportionately impacted in our community. So we're talking to the private sector about how do we keep this going? How do we make this a reality and be able to take care of our kids? Also, we are in support of the extension of free Wi-Fi. So thank you, Aldrin, for including that on that. We will be able to hopefully collaborate with everyone on the call here today. And our Health and Human Services Committee, I just wanted to highlight that we have been working with our Harlem nursing home. They were in the paper for some, unsightly things going on. We wanted to have a community advocacy board in that facility. They did agree to that. So we are moving forward with that. We are excited to be able to talk to them, make some provisions for families that are being affected. So that's one of the things that we're doing. And we did have our new member orientation via Zoom. So we're excited about them. They are selecting their committees. So hopefully in July, they'll get their community assignments. We are, of course, meeting over the summer. So they will be able to be exposed and interactive in that way as well. As far as the length of our meetings, they've been pretty good, maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours. I will say that when we do have elected officials on, they are very respectful of our time. Prior to going to the Zoom platform, we had a discussion with the elected officials to let them know that we wanted 2 to 5 minutes, closer to the 2-minute mark, on their presentations when we were in person. So they have continued that, and we have had great reports, very comprehensive reports from our elected officials. And if they do have a newsletter, we make sure that that goes out, so it's just not a repeat of the newsletter that they've already given. That's all I have from CB10.
Thank you, Cicely. Next, we have Community Board 11, Nilsa Orama, who's joining us by phone. Nilsa.
Hello, everybody hears me?
Yes.
Okay. Xavier Santiago is also on this call, so I'm going to do some brief updates, and then I'm going to let Xavier touch on anything that he would like to more fully flesh out. So just to go through our list, we are having our executive board meeting tonight, and one of the things we're going to be discussing is a CEC4 resolution to terminate the contract of NYPD within the schools and turn it over to another organization that may be better suited than the police within our school system. We are also going to be vetting Uptown Grand Central has asked for support for their open streets program, and so we're going to be looking at that. We also have been with the Uptown boards, as Barry mentioned and Cecily mentioned, a town hall that will be happening on June 22nd. So we're excited about that. Xavier can fill you more in on the housing forum that we had last month. Our Economic Development Committee is looking to support small businesses through advertising through this pandemic. We're continuing to do census reminders. We are looking for SYP support. That is still quite much on our radar. We are happy that one of our organizations, Each One Teach One, is getting funding to be doing some services, as well as 2 other programs. We did do our new member orientation via Zoom. We did 2 of them. We are also supportive of extending the Wi-Fi, as has been mentioned. I want to take a moment to thank our staff that, while they have been working remotely, have worked just as hard or harder at home, because you don't have those parameters where you can just walk away from your desk or lock the door. So I want to thank our office and all our staff and everyone who has supported CB11 during this trying time. As you are aware, CB11 has been in the news, actually Marcus Garvey Park. According to a report, it seems like a noose was found in the park. There are other reports that say that this was left from part of an old construction from the tower. And so this is in flux. we're still having that looked at, you know, and so we hear that it is and we hear that it isn't, and so there's no clear cut definitive answer on that. And so the community is quite concerned because of the spate of hangings and nooses appearing in other parts of the country. We want to ensure that that does not happen here, especially in a community that's overwhelmingly a community of color. With that said, I'm going to let Xavier chime in so he can fill you in a little bit about some the housing forum and any other matters. And I thank you for being part of this meeting today.
Thank you,
Hi,
Nessa.
everyone. Okay. Thank you. I'll keep it brief, Aldrin, if that's all right.
Yes, proceed.
Real quick. Yeah, real quick. Thank you, everyone, especially our partners in CB 9, 10, 11, and 12 for the housing town hall that's going to be coming up June 22nd. I'm really glad to seeing this Northern Manhattan solidarity. This is fantastic. I just wish we could all be together because I'm itching to start barbecuing. That being said, I do want to say we have executive tonight. We're going to be addressing this, and especially when it comes to budget and SYEP. We have a lot of community leaders who have been coming together to give activities for the youth. I'm sure you probably also saw postings on Facebook and Twitter where basketball hoops were put up for a game. Everything was done according to plan. They had sanitation, masks, all the youth got involved. It was really well run. And we want to see more of that happen as we start to open up the parks because they need an outlet. We were all young once, we all acted out, and that is the very nature of humanity. And I would like to make sure that we continue facilitating, helping the youth. And prioritizing within SYEP. But if we don't get the full Monty that we need, we have to find other modes. So real quick on the issue at Marcus Garvey Park, we're staying on top of that. It was something that was, when I saw the report, I was very sick to my stomach. I can't even begin to tell you, but we are staying on top of that. And I ask, as we had during EcoDev, exercise calm and let's be very judicious on it and make sure we do what's right. But this again, is something that is very, very sensitive and charged. And I think we have to do what's right for the community. But I think most people are upset because of the response from the 25th and how it kind of fell flat. But I think we are chasing down that. A couple of things. We did have our housing forum. Jeremiah mediated that, moderated that. He did a really great job. A lot of great information going forward. I think it is recorded. I'll try to get a link and send that out. Another thing we're pushing for is the extension of the executive order. So we don't have to go into a hybrid mode, but we will probably have, we're keeping July 6th, that final day open for executive committee so we can get any last minute business. And then one other thing, two things, I'm gonna make a recommendation, please, with your board members, your community leaders and people you know, please do a check-in with them. That's very important to make sure that people are and how they're doing on all levels, because this has been very much a marathon and endurance trial for all New Yorkers. And the last bit is we'd sent an email, CC'd our borough president, Aldrin, as well as all of our electeds, and trying to get accountability from Oasis, their policy decisions, as we have seen a lot of medical redlining within CB11's district. And we think that that's something that we're at the loggerheads that can't really be tolerated anymore. So those are the kind of quick updates. Thank you very much for your time. Please stay safe.
Thank you. Community Board 12, Eleazar Bueno.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Proceed.
Very good. Thank you. My presentation is usually the last one. I'll make it, instead of a presentation, of talking points, beginning with thanking you, Aldrin, for sending out the letter to all civic chairs in reference to our initiative to request internet service for the students who lapses next week. I think we are of opinion that it should be extended to the end of the calendar year, as I'm sure you guys read, to paraphrase what Aldrin wrote in the letter. So I'll be extremely honored to have you guys join in as the 3 ISPs. Only one of them has been receptive and accommodating to the idea of extending, the internet services for underserved students in our communities. The talking point or part of my presentation is in regards of something that the isolated incident that happened in Dyckman Street. But we were able to turn that negative into a positive. Thank you, Gail, for being present, Aldrin as well, and elected officials that were present. community activists, and even local merchants like Cirilo Moronta from 809 were community as one for 2 consecutive days, so we can discuss in an informal manner. Even we were able to bring the people that were part of the incident and talk about how we were moving forward and disseminate any differences that were mischaracterized by the media and the news. On the third leg of my presentation is in reference to parks, our inability to provide our residents more free time and the space that is available for them. So we're looking at Gail's office and our chairs to also become one in our ask to open up the park spaces for our community residents. Without further, because I'm sure you guys have covered most of what we were going to cover. Thank you for the time, Aldrin.
Thank you, Elizar. Next, we have the Borough President's report. As you know, with each Borough Board, Gail Brewer has her full team on deck. So Gail Brewer is joined by Deputy Borough President Matthew Washington, the Director of the Community Affairs Unit, Rosie Mendez, the Director of the Northern Manhattan Office, Athena Moore, our Chief of Staff, Jessica Mates, her General Counsel, Adele Bartlett, as well as the Director of Land Use, Lisette Chaparro, and we also have the Director of our Budget Unit, Vanessa Diaz-Lopez. So between the different members of Gail's staff, we hope to be able to follow up and take notes on the different issues that are arisen in this Borough Board. And as always, you have your fearless liaisons, community board liaisons, who just, you know, you all work so hard with the district managers and the chairs. I know a round of applause for the liaisons. And the person who brought us all together for this is Gail Brewer. So next we hear from Gail Brewer.
Thank you very much, Aldrin. You are absolutely phenomenal. So I'll try to be quick and stay within the time frame. I just want to mention something that we're working on downtown, which is to paint, as I know Uptown is also thinking of this, to do Black Lives Matter. This has been quite a amazing process. So we are going to be doing along Worth Street around their park that's right near the courthouse. And we've been working with DOT, architects, Black Lives Matter, and I cannot tell you how many more people. I know that Benjamin Moore is donating a lot of the paint. It's going to be delivered to our office today or tomorrow, 100 gallons to start with. We are going to finish it by July 4th. And so it'll be ready on that day. The drama of putting all this together, I don't need to tell you, but to say it is being done by artists, and I mean unbelievable artists, it's quite something. So let's see what happens, but I just want to let you know. Second thing I just want to mention in terms of the pandemic of social justice, I want to thank Street Corner Resources and Each One Teach One. Those are the only two sort of ambassadors of social justice in the community, one in East Harlem, one in Central Harlem. And I have to say, I think that when we talk about what should we be doing, what's the new norm, these groups are really important. And if I had my way, I would fund them in every neighborhood. So that's something to think about for the future and just watching their amazing work. I want to also say, and I think at the end, Aldrin will talk more about what the mayor or DOT, what the mayor's just announced in terms of open streets, but I'm going to go through some of the ways in which we are talking and Zooming in the next few weeks, and then we could talk about, I think that's the one way to discuss what we're working on. Even today, one of the issues regarding the health pandemic that I've been discussing is our waste, because we have about 14 sewage treatment plants in the city of New York, and obviously one in Harlem. And the idea, other countries started, if we can isolate the waste, we can actually predict where the next hotspot in terms of COVID is. Now, what we need apparently is to have a staff here in one of our labs in the city of New York. Right now, we're sending the waste to California, to Stanford, and it's coming back. So we've written to the Department of Environmental Protection. They've written back, not to get into all the details, but this is a great way to support and complement what the tracers are doing. So I just want to let you know we're talking about that at 2:30 today. On Monday, we are doing a couple of things. Obviously, there's a reopening, and we can talk more about that, but we already had planned, as you know, to talk about the amazing Uptown 9, 10, 11, 12 boards, thinking about the reopening, so the timing is perfect. And we also have a discussion that same day with some of the businesses, and we're going to continue that discussion. I'm on the recovery task force with the governor. It's been very helpful with the 5 borough presidents, business, labor, speaker of the city council, and the mayor's office. And we meet every day at 2 o'clock. And it does help because the state liquor authority was one of our last speakers, and you get a sense of what they can and cannot do. So that business discussion is ongoing, and we'd love to work with the bids and the chambers because not every area has a bid. We're also talking on the 24th with the libraries at 4 o'clock. We're going to have a discussion about the census, and I want to thank everyone for all your census work. I am waiting to find all 600 persons. Community boards of Manhattan have filled it out. That's my goal. That's why I was going to call everybody. But as soon as you finish the wonderful survey that Aldrin sent out, then we can announce that, because I do want that to be something that Manhattan is most proud of. You really are an amazing group of individuals, leaders, and community board members. On the 25th, we are, as you know, you heard from Board 8, Kohler has been an issue in terms of Roosevelt Island and question marks. So we're doing at 6 o'clock a discussion with Health and Hospitals and the community board and residents. And then at 6:30, we are doing a discussion about 70 Mulberry Street, and you heard all the back and forth on that. So those are some of the topics that we are focused on. I also want to talk just about the outdoors. We've walked, you know, Lower East Side. I've been in Chinatown. I want to thank Soho because I was there just after a lot of the plywood went up because of the looting. And I want to thank the bid Marthikas, because I understand this Saturday we're going to be painting a lot of the murals. I just want to say, between Washington Heights, Dyckman Street murals are off the charts. They're so phenomenal. In fact, murals everywhere. And I hope that somebody is able, I've been taking some photographs, but we really should have photographs of all these murals, because between that and the signs, something to remember. We also had a phone call yesterday, I believe, with our borough historian, Rob Snyder. Some of you know about it, some of you were on it. And the reason I mentioned it, it was all about how to do oral history with the archivists and with those who are familiar with how to do an actual interview. It's very different than, you know, a reporter, something very special. So it is up on our website, and you should consider looking at it, because this pandemic and this pandemic, the two pandemics, are issues that cannot be forgotten, and they need to be archived. And that's something that you might want to have a committee, a discussion. But in terms of the business, I know that Melba's restaurant, Melba is an amazingly well-known, respected restaurateur in Harlem. She is working with David Rockwell, and David Rockwell is an architect. He contacted me a while ago because he really does understand how to do outdoor seating. He is doing it for free. He is talking to restaurants for free. He would come to the community board for free and talk about what makes sense. I don't know, you know, some of you know how, I think Board 4 knows what a fan I am of him, but I do think that that would be helpful to you, because I don't know anybody else who's thought about this more than he has. We're going to be working to talk about the library. We're going to be working distributing reading kits for young people, and we'll be doing it at the end of next week and the following week. And we'll be talking to the community boards about how to do that. I think the libraries are open slowly starting in July. The librarians are very pleased with the work that the administration at New York Public Library has initiated. They feel like it's really taking into consideration the challenges that the librarians have, and they're really pleased about that. We also are going to work on a postcard campaign to the lowest performing census tracts, because just as somebody indicated earlier, that's where the challenge is. And then also, like everybody else, summer youth employment program. I got in trouble with the mayor, very good company, others, because I said there's no summer plan for young people. And he said I was a politician. I don't know what that meant. But the issue is we do need that. And we also need, we've been pushing social workers at every school, as we said, and then the organics recycling, at least one opportunity to recycle per community board, and we'll see what that happens. So I want to say to thank a lot of the city agencies, particularly on the business front, because whether it's Ariel Felix, who is the nightlife, or those who are supporting from all the different city agencies, they have been phenomenal in terms of response. I think we're all trying to get tested. I've been tested quite a few times because every time you open a new center, I have to get tested. So I've been tested quite a bit, but everybody should be. We did one at Riverside Church initiated by the community board, including Community Board 9. I want to thank you and Athena Moore from our office. And that's open Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays, 9 to 5. And it's such a community experience with lots of material about the census. Thank you very much, Aldrin. And I want to say that this is a challenging time, we're also working, as you know, on NYCHA. We continue to start at the top of Manhattan and go to the bottom every single time, meeting the Fresh Direct truck. This gentleman named Luis is amazing. He has been since, now 3 months, every single day, delivering on the top of Manhattan to the bottom of Manhattan and making it possible for residents of NYCHA to get really excellent food. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gail. Is there anything quick that, any updates that Jessica Mates, Athena Moore, or Rosie Mendez want to add? Okay. Next, we'll go to council member updates, and then we'll have the conversation with DOT, who's on deck, waiting to discuss. As you all know, the mayor this morning announced a 5-part plan for curbside seating through Labor Day, sidewalk seating through October, seating in backyards and patios until July, and plaza seating as well with Department of Buildings and DOT, and parks being open on Monday. But before we get to that, we'll have quick updates from our council members. We'll begin with Council Member Mark Levine.
Well, thank you so much, Aldrin. Thank you, Gail. It's great to see everyone on this day of a lot of news and a lot of action. We have a stated meeting later today. We're going to be voting on a package of bills to bring more accountability to NYPD where it's desperately needed, including a bill that would once and for all belatedly outlaw the use of chokeholds and other maneuvers which lead to asphyxiation. And among the news today is that the mayor announced at his morning presser that he will be signing that bill. Other bills under consideration would create more consistent disciplinary policies at the NYPD, would enshrine in law the legality of filming police interactions, and also would put in law a prohibition on police officers covering their badge numbers. This is just a first step in what's going to have to be much more dramatic change in policing, but a welcome step nonetheless. And of course, happening with the backdrop of our budget negotiations, which are nearing the final stage. We have to pass a budget by the end of the month, of course. And there's growing consensus about not just the need, but also the feasibility of making major cuts to the NYPD of $1 billion potentially or more that would create money that we could invest in important social services like restoring SYEP and a wide variety of health, education, and other programs that make our city healthier and ultimately safer. I do want to say a word or two on the health topic at a very unsettled time in our fight against the coronavirus, when we're all sick of quarantining, we're all desperate for social contact. Businesses are understandably desperate to reopen so they can survive. And really, in an inspiring way, New Yorkers are still taking to the streets to protest racial injustice. But at the same time, this virus is still very much circulating in our city. Yesterday, we had 350 new confirmed cases. We're getting numbers like that every single day. Mostly, we don't know where those cases are coming from. We still have this out in the community, and so we also need to be cautious. I think the answer is opening up more infrastructure for people to be outdoors where the risk of spread is less. So I'm really relieved that the mayor announced today we'll be reopening playgrounds starting Monday. We still need to have a plan to reopen swimming at beaches and providing people outlets like dog runs and handball courts so that they can be outside and can safely interact without the risks of being indoors. We also need to give people better guidance and explain to them that there are still risks in any interaction, but explain how they can minimize the risks of outdoor gathering. And I actually posted in the last day or so guidance on a whole variety of outdoor interactions, what the risks are for the public, and how you can minimize them, from protests to picnics to outdoor cafes. And after I finish speaking, I'll drop that link into the chat. As you've heard me speak about before, and as I have spoken in some of your individual boards, the way we can reduce risk as we reopen in a critical way is by building out contact tracing. And the city, for the first time this week, gave an update on numbers which indicate that only about a third of people who are getting positive tests are actually sharing contacts with the contact tracers. We have to do much better than that. And I think community boards have a huge role in getting the word out and helping people build confidence in this program, making sure they take the call when a contact tracer calls them and that they do participate for the good of their families and the good of their communities. We've talked in the past about the importance of people isolating if they have the virus, if they're contagious, isolating from their families. And the city does offer hoteling for that purpose, which as Alita mentioned, includes free food and prescriptions and much else. But the city in its report this week said that only 40 people, 40, that's the number, 40 people citywide have taken up this offer of hoteling. And remember, we're getting 350 people every single day who are testing positive. So most people are remaining in their apartments when they're sick, where family members can catch the virus. And in fact, that's probably what's driving the spread. So again, community board leaders have a role in telling the public that they have this available, free hotel and all the support services they need. So I want to thank CB8 for hosting a pair of forums on this, and want to ask all of you to be ambassadors to make sure that while we move to reopen, while we get outside to see friends and neighbors, we also do the work to keep ourselves protected at a time when the virus is still very much a threat. That's it from me. Thank you, everybody. Be safe.
Thank you, Mark. Next, we have Councilmember Ben Kalos and his cool cat just chilling out right there.
Thank you
Coolest
very
cat.
much, Aldrin. It's been tough to parent during the pandemic, and we actually had a town hall devoted to the topic. You can watch it at facebook.com/BenKalos/live. And yes, that's my daughter, and this is the new normal. Street service for restaurants and bars is coming back to us on Monday. Gail Brewer did a letter in April following folks doing service on the sidewalks in my district in May. Did a letter with the borough president, Keith Powers. And right now the mayor has announced that outdoor seating can't exceed the business frontage width. They can't extend past the 8 feet depth of the curb lane. It cannot block bus stops, standing or stopping zones, doorways, FDNY access to a fire hydrant. And so there's a lot more guidance around there, but we're concerned that that might be very limiting. That's why I'm a pre-introduction sponsor of Introduction 1957, which we are hoping to pass at the next stated session. The key piece of 1957, which you can check on Legistar at the City Council website, is it would actually require notice and consultation with the community boards, which we feel has been largely missing from what the mayor has been putting forward, and we look forward to working with you. CBA did a whole panel on it this week, and we're glad to be working with you. The issue of opening more streets, we were able to work closely with Speaker Johnson and Borough President Gail Brewer to make East End Avenue one of the first streets in the borough and the city to be opened. Residents are still pushing for more space because it's just so crowded. And again, we're asking all the community boards to please pass resolutions indicating locations where you would feel comfortable. Another item we've collaborated with the borough president on is just on the issue of having access to face coverings. When the mayor announced free distribution, he did not actually provide any locations on the east side. Not very many actually throughout all of Manhattan, including Upper Manhattan. So we got together with elected officials, and now the mayor's office is distributing masks by the thousands to elected officials. We've partnered with community organizations from East Harlem to Roosevelt Island to give them. So if you are a community organization, and I've mentioned this at the last borough board, if you haven't already gotten it, if your community board hasn't gotten access, please let us know. And at this point, we are open to anyone working with the borough president in Manhattan to make sure people have access to those masks and distributing those masks. At this point, it seems that we may be out of the reusable masks and we may be distributing the disposable masks. On the issue of testing, please, I was so angry and frustrated with elected officials from the top down saying, don't get tested, when we needed to just get access to testing. And now we have it. It's widely and commercially available. I've been tested. I got tested because I was afraid that I might be asymptomatic and be putting my constituents or anyone else in jeopardy. I came out negative both for the coronavirus and for the antibody, which means I must be good at staying at home, washing my hands, not touching my face. But we need to make sure that everyone is doing it, making sure we have our contact tracing program online and working. I want to thank the borough president for doing a town hall. These are good paying jobs, many of them over $50,000. So let's just make sure we get people from our communities into these jobs. If you're having any difficulty accessing these jobs, please reach out to my office, the borough president. We'll work with you. As you may have read in the New York Post, as co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, I've been pushing to defund NYPD. Folks need to be willing to say those words. And what that means is pulling police out of schools to end the schools to prison pipeline, pulling police out of our parks so that we can have parks associates and people work with that. It means pulling police out of the duty of trying to arrest our homeless people and what have you, and replacing those folks with people who have the skills and expertise to help people where they are. If you want to learn more about my position, you can find a post I authored way back at the beginning of June on Medium. You can find that through benkalos.com. We had a pandemic tenants' rights town hall with every East Side elected official. If you are interested, please feel free to watch it on Facebook. As you may have read in the New York Times, we are opening up access to about more than 250,000 affordable units that we're hoping to get back on the market as re-rentals. And this is something that actually is a bill I wrote with Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer, Introduction 1015, now Local Law 64. And starting this July, we're going to have 2,500 units just this summer. By way of scope, the most units we've ever had in 1 year is 8,000. And I'm hoping that with this legislation, with this law, we're going to see 50% increase in the amount of affordable housing available to New York City residents. Also, as you may have read in the Daily News, proposed $15 billion in cuts, starting with corporate welfare and subsidies for homes and yards of $6 billion. $2.3 billion that we spent on PPE that was may not have ever been delivered. The billion from the NYPD, and what would we use it for? We could spend $800 million out of that $15 billion in savings, $5 billion more than our current deficit, and we could get universal youth jobs, universal summer camp, universal after school, universal 3K for all of Manhattan, since most of Manhattan doesn't have it, and fully funding our senior centers. And that's just a start. There's just so much waste in the budget. And as our budget process drags on, I'm hoping community boards will weigh in. Tonight, I'm hoping folks will join me in a community conversation town hall with Speaker Corey Johnson. You can RSVP at benkalos.com/events starting at 6 p.m. And tomorrow, I will be closing my office in observance of Juneteenth. I'd ask many of you to do the same. And last but not least, you've heard me mention this at every single borough board going back several months, vote. Absentee applications were due on Tuesday. If you applied and still haven't gotten your ballot, please contact my office, bkalos@benkalos.com. We will do our best to help you. Early voting has already started. You can vote today until 6 p.m. You can vote Friday till 3, Saturday and Sunday from 10 to 4. You can find your poll site at nycpollsitelocator.com. In my district, I only have 2 early voting sites. That is not enough. I'm asking all the community boards to consider setting up their own poll site task force to identify early voting locations and identify poll sites so that we don't have lines, especially during this pandemic. And as always, you can still vote on Tuesday, June 23rd. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from DOT, Kimberly Rancourt. Are you on? And Jackie Lazaro. If any of you are on phone, you could star 6 to unmute. I see Jackie Lazaro. Jackie? Kimberly? Does anyone have their cell numbers that you could text them and tell them that we're ready for them?
Hey, Aldrin, it looks like Kimberly's a panelist. Is she
Yes.
unable to talk then?
Yes. Where's Kimberly? Oh, she's not a panelist, you're saying, or she is?
She's a, or she's an attendee, not a panelist.
Oh, can we bring Kimberly into the panelist room?
I think Kimberly Rancourt just got promoted. Who was the other one?
Jackie Lazaro.
I'm here. Hi.
Okay, Jackie's
Can
here.
you hear
Okay.
me?
And
Oh,
yes,
no, this is Kimberly.
and Kimberly's here as well. Okay.
Hi. Thank you for that. And thanks for having us. As folks have already mentioned on this call, earlier this morning, the mayor announced that we'll be entering phase 2 on Monday and also signed an executive order launching the open restaurants program. So we're really excited about that. That will allow restaurants and bars to use sidewalk space and roadway space for outdoor dining as long as they can meet specific criteria and follow certain guidelines. So starting on Monday, restaurants will have sort of 3 different options. One is existing backyard or patio seating. Another is adding sidewalk seating in front of their business as long as they maintain an 8-foot clearance for pedestrians and meet some other ADA requirements. And then also piloting roadway seating in the curb lane of the roadway in front of their establishment as long as parking and loading are allowed, or for whichever times of the day parking and loading are allowed. And that's a pilot through Labor Day. And looking forward from that, we're also working with community groups to add additional seating in the roadway on nights and weekends in places where we have open streets. And I'm sure there'll be questions about that, but the open streets process is ongoing. We're still accepting requests and applications for that. And then also working on plaza seating through the business improvement districts. And so today, as of now, our website is live for open restaurants. It's nyc.gov/open restaurants. That has more information about the program, but the application will be available on the website starting tomorrow. That part is not yet live. But the general idea is that, and many of you have heard this from us already, that restaurants and bars will be able to just go onto the website and fill out the application, and will self-certify that they are following the criteria and the guidelines, rather than having a process where DOT accepts applications and reviews each one individually and follows up. So that's to keep it simple and try to get it as widespread as possible. A couple of other things, SBS will have a hotline for questions for business owners, which is 888-SBS-4NYC. And they'll also have restaurant guidance specific for reopening restaurants on their website. So we are really excited about this. I know everyone's very eager, both businesses and New Yorkers wanting to meet patrons at businesses are really excited about moving forward with this. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Some of these details are really just coming through at this point, but happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so I'm sure we have some questions, but let's start off with questions that we have from attendees. So one question is regarding concerns of the entrance of residential entrances that are very close in proximity to the entrance of a business. So does the Open Restaurants Initiative plan a graphic to include sightings showing residential entrances and take those entryways into consideration so that residents are assured of safe social distancing by restaurant customers? So there's an issue, a lot of people congregating in front of buildings and people trying to get into their buildings because of the proximity to an establishment.
The table setup would be only limited to the space in front of the established and cannot block entrances to buildings, residential or otherwise.
Is there a space distance from the entrance of a building?
I'm not sure on that specific criteria. I have not seen that, but I can, the criteria will be online and we can check into that. But I think it's generally, I haven't seen that.
Because sometimes entrances of some buildings are sometimes in close proximity to the lines of where tables are set up outside, outdoors.
Right, it's a really good point. And we can try to get clarity on that issue.
And then another question by Pete Davies, same person, is for vendor enforcement, this is regarding particularly food carts and food trucks and their placement. Now that enforcement has been removed from the NYPD, what is the immediate plan for enforcement? What is the agency who will cover that enforcement? Are there adequate funds dedicated to that? Is that a DOT thing now?
As I do not believe that is a DOT thing. We don't have enforcement at this point.
Okay. Now, questions from the panelists. I saw Mark Diller. Mark.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Kimberly, for that report. I look forward to the details. I'm particularly thankful for the self-certification process so that will deliver on the hope of being a streamlined and quick process. I guess the question I have for you is, this probably will take a little getting used to, and restaurants will be need to find their way with this a little bit. The question I have is, will there be a grace period with respect to enforcement so that education is how we communicate with our small businesses before we start levying fines and going down that route?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall this is meant to be very collaborative with the restaurants. We're looking for folks to be good neighbors. We're not looking to, I mean, we're doing this project, we want it to be as widespread as possible in order to be as helpful as possible. So we want it to succeed and we want businesses to be able to be open, and we understand that everything this is very new and different, and it's kind of going to be a little bit of a work in progress as we move forward. So. Yes.
Thanks. And could you please put into the chat the website address for applications and information? That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep, I actually already put that in the chat.
What was that? That last comment?
I think someone said it was already put in. Oh, Jackie.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's just to repeat it because it's pretty straightforward. nyc.gov/open restaurants.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Michael Marino.
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions. The first one is this initiative meant only for commercial zones, or what zones is it relegated to? And I'll look on the website, but what, if any, guidelines are there around wait lines? You know, now that, you know, they're not going to be able to have a lot of tables out front. So obviously, are restaurants going to be required to do them only by reservation, or are people going to be standing around on the sidewalk blocking pedestrian traffic waiting for a table to open up?
Fair question. What was the first question again? I'm sorry.
What zones? Commercial zones?
Oh, right. It's at this point, it's my understanding is that it's any restaurant or bar, regardless of zoning regulation. And that as far as the wait lines, it's a great question. We're not at this point requiring any online or like reservations. So I think it's going to be up to folks, up to businesses to really keep their customers lined up in a way that's proper, that the way that we have been, or they have been, we've been asking them to do throughout the city already with retail and other places. Is really, we need New Yorkers to really step up, either business owners and residents and people visiting dining establishments to be safe.
We have a question now from Alida Camp.
Thank you. So these are two interrelated questions. We had a resolution about making sure for restaurants where tables going into the street would affect bike lanes, and asking that bike lanes be moved temporarily to ensure the safety of both the bike riders and the people working for and dining at the restaurant. If they were able to use, and the city were able to facilitate use of additional sidewalk space, we have obviously a lot of vacant storefronts, a lot of potentially closed storefronts for a while. If there were a way for the city to facilitate use of that space, and it relates to the restaurants that because they're next to bus stops or fire hydrants can't have the extent of the outdoor seating that other restaurants that don't have those limitations, and again, the fairness of the process, that if the city were able to do something with the sidewalks and speak to landlords or provide or talk to owners of otherwise empty spaces about it, it would go a long way towards fairness and towards helping the restaurants and still maintaining the safety of both bike riders and pedestrians and the restaurant patrons and employees are using if they had to put tables in the streets.
Right, so I think we spoke about this a little bit earlier this week, and I think at this point the sidewalk space is allowed in front of a particular establishment as part of our efforts to keep this as simple and fair as possible. You know, we don't have the capacity to go through discussions with every business, which is why it's a self-certification and it's a sort of set standard in that way. But as we look toward July and sort of more creative solutions with street closures and that sort of thing, there might be more opportunities there. And also we did speak about the bike lanes, and at this point for a protected bike lane that's parking protected, that parking space is available to restaurants if they're meeting all of the criteria. And I think we discussed at your meeting this week just about how maybe we could, if you're reaching out to us about particular corridors or block level solutions, we're happy to have those discussions to see if there's adjustments that can be made.
Thank you. I know you were there for quite some time. Thank you. And we have
Sure.
both the small business meeting and transportation, and thank you for that. It's just a question, I think, of fairness, but I won't take up more time. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we have a question from Carter Booth. Carter Booth.
All right, and a couple of quick questions. How will this process integrate with the State Liquor Authority as far as extending the premises for service, especially if it's across public walkways, et cetera? And just to be clear, that sidewalk cafes will be allowed in residential zoning where they're currently precluded. And if you, and we have a lot of sidewalks that are sort of 9 feet wide that, you know, I anticipate there'll be a lot of confusion. Is there very clear and specific regulations on the website? I haven't had a chance to take a look that will eliminate, you know, that confusion, because I think a lot of businesses are really desperate to have outdoor seating. And I foresee that those conversations being very difficult as far as the equity issues that are involved there.
Sure. Yes, the guidelines on the website do lay out specific footage and those sorts of things. And there's a diagram that shows some of the different distances that and clearances that need to be maintained. And I'm sorry, the first part of your question, there's a lot going on with my kids in the background.
How is this process integrated with the state
Oh.
liquor authority?
Right. So I don't have the details of the arrangement specifically, but I know that we've coordinated with them so that once you've completed the certification online, like you'll have to provide the license numbers and those things, but once you've completed our application online and self-certification process, then you're automatically okay with the state. You don't have to do another any kind of additional filing with SLA.
Okay, and does that include if there are stipulations that are in place that prohibit outdoor service? Or is that something that is...
This will allow
an
the
issue
outdoor
because-
service even regardless.
even because there are a number of stipulations which a lot of the boards have, and it's a question as far as those are what we see as binding, and I'm just curious if they're all being overridden, or if there's a process in place, or is that something that we should be inquiring with the state liquor authority? Because their guidelines on their website say that a letter would be required from the local municipality, or in New York City's case, it'd be community boards, if there are stipulations in place that prohibit the use of the outdoor spaces.
There is additional information on the website that might be worth checking out. There's some links to state resources, and also just a note that once you fill out the application, it notes that it'll fulfill all the requirements for the of right extension or the municipal extension, so you have no further filing with SLA.
But there's conflicting information on the state liquor authority's website, which is what this is going to be an issue, I think, for a lot of community boards. And it's something that if we need to start writing letters and waiver letters with respect to those, I think we all need to prepare for that, particularly our staff.
So again, my understanding, and I'm not an expert in the liquor laws, but is that through this process, restaurants and bars will be able to serve outdoors.
No, I understand that, but what I'm saying is but there are other sort of overlays. I know this is very technical, but it's something that I think for Manhattan boards, we really need to sort out quickly. You know, I don't know if that's something that if you guys want to do a call with the liquor authority, we'd be very interested in doing that as quickly as possible, just to sort that out, because that's going to be a big issue for certain places, not all places.
Carter, I can tell you that CB3 has already been asked for, has already been approached by our council member, initially wanting letters for every single one of our businesses. And I know that our district manager has been dealing with that, and I believe has got them to agree to let us do one blanket letter.
Okay.
And the district manager for CB3, Susan Stetzer, in the chat room says, if there are stipulations, CB must waive steps for businesses. Bars cannot serve if there are stipulations against, and must be waived by the community board. Next, we turn to Lowell. Lowell has his hands up.
Yeah, I'm going to follow up on what Carter was just saying. We had, CB4, we had sent a letter, I think it went to DOT, if memory serves, about a month ago that said that we were in favor of this, but not on side streets. Please keep it on the avenues, because the side streets, for the most part, where these restaurants are located, are residential. And there are plenty of, as Carter referred to, plenty of stipulations that are designed to protect the residents of those blocks. And it looks like you're throwing those out the window for the most part, according, you know, with the, save what Susan said in the text. What I want to know is when the community, when this goes into place and the community gets up in arms and says, well, what happened to all the stipulations? And they come complaining to us that why aren't you enforcing your stipulations? Where are we supposed to go with those complaints?
I'm not sure that I have an answer at this point about where you should go with those complaints. I know that our initiative has been trying to be as inclusive as possible because we've heard a huge outcry from restaurants and bars and other folks throughout the city looking for us to support these businesses as we come back into recovery.
Understood, but part of our
same-
responsibility is to protect the residents as well. And there's a conflict there. And from your perspective, you've completely ignored the residents' perspective, and we don't have that luxury.
We expect that there will be, we expect to hear a lot of complaints in our office from people who are, have concerns about these restaurants and bars with seating outside. I know that it's not going to be as smooth in every location. We also reserve the right to take away the authorization for restaurants or business bars who are not complying with our requirements. So I think we'll have to kind of work through this process together in collaboration. It's something that is very different than anything we have done before. It's really unprecedented. We've been moving quickly to try to make this a very simple process, as the mayor asked us to do, to create a simple process where we could be as broad-reaching as possible to try to have the best impact and most strongest impact on the economic recovery that we can through this program.
Right. You've
So
basically confirmed that we're screwing the residents of these side streets. If there are restaurants there, that their concerns don't matter, and we're going to have nowhere to go with this. Thank you.
Kimberly, and I know if Rosie and Athena want to chime in, I think, Kimberly, we need to schedule a meeting ASAP between DOT and the community board chairs in this regard sooner than later, because I guess you get the sense that a blanket treatment of this in ways means a reversal of much of the work that community boards have done throughout the years and their local knowledge in terms of the impact of various local businesses on ongoing concerns of residents. So I think we should really have a meeting scheduled. I'm not sure who in DOT
Sure, we're happy
be.
to discuss this. We've been having conversations with folks. We're happy to continue having conversations with folks. I think I just want to emphasize this is a temporary pilot program intended for a very specific short-term purpose. So it's not meant to roll back everything that's happened over the years or the responsibilities of other folks. It's meant to be as inclusive as possible to help us get through this time together. But we are certainly happy to have conversations as we always are.
And then, yes, Athena?
Yeah, I think you've addressed a lot of the issues, but I just wanted to underscore that what I was hearing from some of the uptown boards, some of which were stated, is just continuing issues around sanitation, security, transportation, and timing. The timing issue I hear is now dealt with because it's going to be short term and time limited, which it wasn't before. But the other areas I think still warrant some attention and discussion.
Sure, and as far as like sanitation, if folks have the barriers out as needed around their seating in the roadway, they have to be responsible. We're looking to business owners and to residents to be responsible, to be good neighbors in this case, as we all, as I said, all work together to try to help us get through this very, very challenging time.
Cicely?
Aldrin?
Yes,
Aldrin,
yes,
just saying that we have Borough Service Cabinet next week, and depending on what was announced and when, we were thinking about possibly inviting DOT to that meeting. So maybe that could be the follow-up and we could have that with the DMs.
That would be great. I mean, also understanding that this is really, I mean, this has come together very quickly. It's only this morning that the mayor announced the final plan. So we are still, I'm still catching up on some of the details and we'd be happy to have those conversations.
And maybe you covered this already, but we have Laura Tannenbaum, an attendee who's asking a question as well. And I think the nature of the question deals around enforcement. So for example, how do I know if the appropriate amount of tables in front of establishments should be 15 tables, or should be really only 8 tables?
You would have to, so the number of tables, there's different agencies that sort of regulate different things, right? So DOT is regulating the amount of space of the sidewalk and the roadway and what constraint, like what criteria you have to meet there. But as far as the number of tables that you can put in that space, that's coming from guidance from the state, and that's all available on Small Business Services website and Department of Health website. But those aren't really, that piece isn't really a DOT regulation. But ours, you should be able to determine fairly simply if you're able to measure the sidewalk space to figure out, or the roadway space to figure out where they should be and where they're allowed to be, if that makes sense. There's sort of two different criteria. There's the health social distancing criteria, and then there's the table setup in the roadway and sidewalk that's based on more on the like ADA requirements and just maintaining clearance and safety from a street safety perspective.
So tables in excess of what would be allowable under the social distancing criteria, that would be a SBS issue, is what you're saying? The enforcement in that regard will be SBS?
My understanding is yes, but we can have further conversations about that.
All right. Cicely, I know you had a question.
I guess just a follow-up to that one. Is that, so the requirement for social distancing, the road plan, the seating chart, is that all in the application for the businesses? The self-certification application? Do they have to submit a plan?
You don't have to submit a plan. You do have to check that you are following the criteria that are there. And so there are guidelines and then for DOT's requirements, and then there are additional links to other guidelines from the state and other agencies.
Carter Booth, do you have your hand up again, or I haven't lowered your hand?
Yes, I had a question as far as, are the applications viewable by the public, number one, and number two, are there any restrictions on the hours of operation?
My understanding is that the applications, I don't know that they would be viewable by the public. And hours of operation, I believe, are the same as the business. I have to check. I'm sorry. I apologize. I mean, this is really all coming together today and in the following last week. So we don't have all of the details, or I don't have all of the details, but I'd be happy to have further conversations.
Next, Alida Camp. You have to unmute. There you go. There you go. You're unmuted now.
Thank you. I have you muted on my phone because I'm doing audio through my phone. But anyway, I'm concerned. It doesn't sound like there's a mechanism for enforcement. And we've heard while a lot of restaurants and bars will probably be good neighbors, there are a number of them that have already exhibited their bad neighbor qualities by providing the means for people to congregate without social distancing, without masks, with music, putting out chairs and tables. There are even some posted in the questions today. So I'm just really concerned if they've already been bad neighbors while things have been, and there's no indication the virus has left, then self-certification seems only a means to facilitate this rather than to provide for the safety of the public. And if you're saying that SBS is the enforcer for social distancing, and I'm sure they can't possibly have the manpower to follow up throughout the city, there just seems to need to be a means to ensure that the residents are protected as Lowell raised, and that the social distancing is required, and that there is an incentive for places to remain good neighbors. There doesn't seem to be any form of incentive, and in fact, rewards for those who haven't followed the guidelines and the directives so far. So I see this, and I appreciate that there is a force of the virus and wanting to help small businesses and protecting residents and transportation, but this seems a rather hasty way of benefiting the restaurants and bars, which we support at the expense of plenty of others in the community. And I'm just not seeing the balance on enforcement or anything else. So thank you.
I think we are. It is a challenging balance for us to be able to move forward with something quickly, because at the same time we're getting a lot of folks asking us why we're moving so slowly and why it's not in place, and how concerned they are about the very short warm weather season and how much it means to restaurants. And at the same time, so we are, this is our best effort to be as accommodating and to be as helpful as we can with this space. And of course, this is very new, as I've said, and we'll be continuing to monitor as it goes into place, and we'll make adjustments. And if folks are problematic and we're getting reports of and complaints, then we have the ability to tell them that they are no longer allowed to put their seating out.
If I could just follow up, what are your plans for monitoring? Because if you don't have the manpower to go and check and are allowing restaurants and bars to self-certify, then how are you going to follow up on complaints and on anecdotes and on accusations? And we do want to help the restaurants and bars, but I just am not sure how this is all going to proceed. There were a lot of months where there was ample opportunity to figure all of this out, and yet it's being thought about and implemented in what seems like just a few days. And I just am not understanding how any of this is going to really work on a practical level when things are already so crowded and so crazy. But I will stop here and thank you for your time. I'm muting myself.
Lowell, you're next. I'm sorry, Lowell.
I've been looking at the website on the roadway seating piece. This does not address bike lanes at all. What is supposed to happen when there's a bike lane next to the curb and the parking lane is closer to the travel lane? There's no guidance about that whatsoever. What are the operators supposed to do when there's a bike lane in front of their establishment?
My understanding, and what I said, is that they are allowed to use the parking lane if there is a parking lane. If there is a curbside bike lane with no parking lane, then there isn't parking space for them to use. And as I have also mentioned, in locations where community boards have expressed particular interest in addressing conditions on the roadway or improving conditions or making adjustments at sort of a larger scale than just an individual by individual business basis, we're willing to have those conversations. So if
Right, but in most places where there's a bike lane, the parking lane is outside of the bike lane. You have the curb, you have the bike lane, then you have the parking lane, then you have the travel lanes. Are they allowed to use the travel lane, the parking lanes on the other side of the bike lane, which means you're going to have servers going back and forth across the bike lane?
Yes, that is my understanding.
Next, we have Cicely.
I have a quick question. So this right now is just covering the curb and the parking lane. Before organizations or these restaurants start trying to apply to close down whole streets, will we get notice of that or of that change or that application?
For open streets?
Yes, and the restaurants being allowed to move out and totally close down an entire street. So move off the curb and take over the entire street. Will we get notice of that if there's going to be a closed street like that?
Yes. So that is something that we are still working through. We have existing open streets and we have existing open streets with restaurants. At this point, as of Monday, they would only be allowed to use the curb lane as they are able to on other streets. As we move forward with how to approach broader use of the roadbed at certain times in evenings and weekends in July, we'll be working with the community, including the boards.
Okay, and I just had a quick follow-up, I'm sorry. So just so I understand the application process, so when they submit the application, it comes right to you. So there's all these other agencies that have little bits and pieces. How are they notified that the application has been submitted? Do they get the application as well?
I'm not aware of how that happens. I'm sorry. I'm still figuring out some of these things. It's been, I imagine that it will be shared among agencies. There have been a lot of conversations with our sister agencies, a lot of work, collaborative work. And so, yes.
So, Aldrin?
Yes.
It's Rosie. I was just hoping that we can move the conversation because it's clear that there's not all the answers. We will be having this discussion at Borough Service Cabinet next week. And hopefully we can get additional answers then. And certainly any questions that we can get ahead of time, we can give to the agencies and possibly try to invite SBS and DOH as well to Borough Service Cabinet to try to get all the questions answered as to which agency will be doing what. So if everyone's in agreement, because I think, you know, unfortunately we're gonna not have all the answers today, so we'll just keep going back and forth on this.
And if anyone, I know everybody, if people have been writing into the chat room, different questions and concerns, if you can continue to do that so we can have a better understanding of the exact questions we want answered next week. I know a ton of it has to do with enforcement both of excessive tables, enforcements on social distancing, enforcements on complaints, enforcements on stipulations. So there's a great deal that still needs to be worked out. And we're very clear that community boards, chairs, board members, and district managers at the epicenter of who we expect these different city agencies to be coordinating with. So yes, Rosie.
If chairs could just work with their district managers and we can try to get these questions ahead of time so we can provide them to the agency so they can come to the meeting prepared to answer those questions. That would probably be helpful for next week to have a really.
That would be really helpful for us.
Yeah. Is that proposal good for chairs as well? Raise your hand, nodding your head, yeah? Okay. Okay, thank you, Rosie, for that. So yeah, so we'll proceed in that way. And thank you, Kimberly, and thank you, Jackie from DOT. I know that the announcement was just made this morning, as you mentioned, so a lot of the details still haven't been worked out, but as you can see, there's great interest among community boards, leadership and community board membership because they are the front line of for constituents with concerns. And they've already telegraphed to you some of the many concerns that will be forthcoming if we don't think through some of these issues beforehand.
Yeah, and we certainly appreciate the feedback. And as always, we look forward to working with everyone to try to make this work the best that we can in this sort of very innovative and unprecedented program.
Aldrin,
thank you.
There's a question in the chat for an email to forward questions to. If you want to share your email or Rosie's email.
To forward questions to our office?
Yes.
Yes, definitely. You could put my email up.
Aldrin, do you want to put my email since I'll be in touch with the chairs as well? And
Absolutely.
then I can, eliminate duplicate questions.
Absolutely. Can you put Rosie Mendez, Director of Community Affairs, email up for the public so we can share? All right, thank you. So again, thank you to Kimberly, thank you, Jackie, thank you to DOT for the presentation and answering questions. Now we'll have, is there any other further business? If not, can we entertain a motion to adjourn? I see a motion to adjourn.
Motion. So moved.
I see the motion from Mark Diller, and I see everybody enthusiastically seconding it.
Aldrin?
Second.
Yes. Aldrin?
Yes.
There is a question. I think some chairs are interested in coming to the Borough Service Cabinet meeting. we usually don't have chairs, but under the circumstances, can we have chairs and DMs present who would like to attend?
Absolutely. That's in the past. In the past, some chairs have attended Borough Service Cabinet meetings, but yeah, chairs are welcome.
Okay, great. So I'll send all the information and the invite to the chairs as well as the DMs.
Great, thank you.
So, we had a motion, we had a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, abstentions, hearing none, motion passes. Thank you, everyone. We've concluded our June Borough Board meeting. Have a great day, everyone.
Great meeting.
Thank you. Stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.